the rural mother, and this is So You've Married a Farmer, Now What? And my guest today is Camilla. Welcome, Camilla.
Thanks for having me.
No trouble at all. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your story.
So I'm Camilla Herbig. I grew up currently live at Colli on my husband's farm with our daughter Sophie, who's nearly 18 months old. My backstory is I grew up at Mendoran, so not far from Dubbo, on a mixed sort of cropping and livestock place. We had sheep, cattle, and dabbled in a bit of everything with cropping, which was a family farm. I think I was fourth generation. We ended up selling that in 2006. And my parents moved to Gilgandra, so they're in town now. At that time I was at boarding school, so did the whole 6 years of boarding school, 3 years at uni in Sydney, and then came back out west because I was sick of the big smoke and ended up meeting my husband, moved to the farm, and the rest is history, I guess.
Oh, that's excellent.
Yeah, it's good fun. So we, on the farm at the moment, it's Jace's parents' sort of farm that he's now a partner in. All cropping, which is all mostly cereal crops, and all winter cropping.
Oh, excellent. We've got little Caroline Elizabeth here again with us today, so she's just down here in the bouncer.
She's doing fabulously. It's been interesting, and then obviously the transition into living on the farm is one transition, but then I think the transition to being a mum on the farm, it's like starting from scratch to a degree, and how we go from just being the two of us and being quite flexible to this new little person and how they fit into that sort of bigger picture. It's been an interesting juggling. By no means am I the expert. I think I feel like a bit of a fraud and an imposter at times because we're still definitely learning. But no, it's been an interesting and enjoyable learning curve, I guess.
That's good to hear. Yeah. So let's start with when you first moved to the farm. So can you tell us a little bit what that was like, how things changed on sort of a day-to-day basis for you, and your interactions?
Yeah, it was really nice because at the time Jace was still living with his parents. So us moving in together was renovating a house on the farm and moving in. So it was quite a big transition. I was living in town and on weekends I'd go and stay with him, but it was with his parents. So we were sort of, all under the one roof. Then all of a sudden Jace and I lived together on the farm. So for both of us it was a big transition. It wasn't just me moving into his house. It was big. So suddenly went from living 5 minutes from work to an hour from work, but on the flip side gaining my weekends back because I wasn't travelling to go and see him. I was already there. And at the time I was studying my Masters in social work, so during the week previously I'd be cramming in all my study and assessments and things so that I could go and spend the weekend on the farm with him, whereas once we lived together I could actually spread that out and do a bit on the weekends, and because when you're in your own space you can do that. So it was a nice transition. I think it probably was a somewhat easier transition for me because I'd come from living on a farm, so things like snakes and blackouts and the whole farm logistics side of things, living out of town and having to plan your grocery shop and having milk in the cupboard and all that sort of stuff was sort of normal to me, but I think going to living with around someone else's family and being part of a different family business and family unit is always a new learning curve, and it was really nice, and it sort of evolved from there, I guess. But then I guess moving on to having Soph, it's been different. Like I think COVID as well threw a curveball in there as well. So we went from when we moved in together, it was 2015. So it had been a little bit dry, but got into 2016, really wet year. Like, had to sell my car because I wasn't able to get it out of the property for 3 months, and as soon as I could, raced into Toyota, swapped it for something bigger that could actually get through the water. And then we've been into drought that was just horrendous, then into COVID. It's been quite a strange cycle of things, and now it feels like we're sort of getting back on track and back at work after having Soph, and it's I guess you keep just going through the motions to a degree, and every year's kind of different on the land, which is kind of cool, but
keeps us on our toes.
Yeah, it
keeps things interesting.
That's it. New sorts of challenges. So yeah.
So you mentioned having to change your car for the weather.
Yeah.
When you went in to swap your car, was there certain things that you needed for it? Like, I remember going and getting my first changeover car, and I was like, it has to have a proper spare tyre, it can't have a space saver, and it's got to have a roo bar. And did you have any clarifications like that for it?
Oh yeah, all of those things.
Yeah.
The clearance was the main thing, because we're on a pretty rubbish dirt road, but with a couple of creeks that get water through them. So when there's water, there's absolutely no chance of getting through in a lower car. And then the road also gets pretty slippery. So yeah, four-wheel drive, good traction control, and some clearance, rhubarb, lights, like the whole shebang. And then all the mod cons, obviously. Like you want good aircon, good stereo, a nice little sat nav, all the bells and whistles that you can get. But yeah, I think clearance. And I find it's so funny even comparing nowadays. Like I've got a good friend who's got this beautiful BMW, and she lives she's on a farm. She's like a stone's throw from the highway, so it's all tied to town. And someone asked me, "Oh, are you going to get a BMW too?" I'm like, I literally wouldn't get it to my house, like in a good day, let alone when it's wet or it's just not doable. You kind of do get a bit pigeonholed into having one certain type of vehicle, I think. So, and we're one of the many now on the waiting list for a new car as well. So, it's sort of funny how you do have to look for those certain things, though, don't you?
Yeah. Is there anything in particular that you found that you always pack in your car to make sure that you've got with you? Yeah, so like pre-kids, always had a jacket, a decent pair of boots, an umbrella. I've got a battery jump starter kit, because I've a couple of times, even in town, I've just had a flat battery for who knows why. And you can also I feel like such a boss sometimes if there's someone else who's got a flat battery. I'm like, I'm a woman, but I can help. Like, watch me go. So that's been quite good. How empowering.
Yeah, I know, right? You do feel like it's a bit of a good moment. Since having kids, though, having that go bag has been so invaluable. Yeah. So spare nappies, wipes, whatever clothes they're in at the stage, a muslin wrap, all those sorts of things has been really, really good. Because the number of times, I'm a bit of a chronic overpacker, so our nappy bag's probably double the size of everyone else's, and I have enough for a week, not a day. Yep. But there's still times you're caught and you're like, I've run out of nappies, and I'm like, I can run to the car and grab those things. So it has been, that's why we actually need big cars, is to cart around all the extra garbage that we need. Or to pick up the feed when we're in town. Yeah. I only thought the net wrap I only thought this morning driving into town, I was like, I'm pretty sure I have a bag of dog biscuits and a bag of chook pellets that are still in the boot from last week that I haven't taken out. I'm like, note to self, must take those out. But didn't even notice. So oh dear. Good old boot space. Yeah. It's so good like that. That's it. Yeah. So it's all good. I think they're all things that you have to almost adapt to and you learn. And even those little sorts of things are great little lessons or mum hacks, I guess. What do you find good? Yeah. I'd never really thought about the kids' go bag until a friend, as a baby shower present, I think she gave us just a little kit, like a little carry sort of thing to put in the car. Yeah. I was like, and then in hospital, we got the new bag. Yeah. We call it the Gladys bags. Yeah. Gladys Berejiklian was the premise. So we acted as if she'd personally packed it herself. Yeah. We used to call it Honey Gladys. Yeah. So the Gladys bag is now the cargo bag. Yeah. Just all little fun things you learn along the way. And I think talking to other people, you learn so many different things and pick up lots of different mum hacks. And was there one piece of advice particular that you were told either before you got married or once you moved to the farm that really resonates with you? I was thinking about this. I think one that has always really stuck with me is the importance of having a garden around the house, and even if it's just lawn, just having some sort of oasis that's separate to the farm itself, and particularly during drought, that made a massive difference. And I've worked really, really hard to just keep a bit of lawn, so that you just had some sort of green, because I think it can be so relentless, particularly during drought, obviously, it can be relentless out and about. But even just having that sort of separation that, I don't know, on a farm, you can feel like you're always on the farm. I know Jace is one that, you know, if he just sees something, he'll go and do it. And so he ends up working every single day of the year. So having that sort of separation is quite handy. So yeah, I think that's been a really good one. Obviously, you know, the way to anyone's heart is through their stomach. I'm a big cook and love sort of, just feeding everyone. I think that's my love language, is just like feeding and gifting.
I'm very much the same.
So that's been a huge one. I've actually started a little Instagram page called Tracker Snacks, which is my little outlet.
I've seen that one.
Yeah, in that way. So that's been good fun. But yeah, I think just cooking and sharing recipes and things, like not in a old school housewife kind of way, but in a what's practical and doable within your day-to-day life. So like I use heaps of packets of things, I freeze a lot of stuff. It's about making it practical, not gourmet or ridiculous. So yeah.
And I think sometimes you can be caught, let me pick her up. I think sometimes you can be caught in like just doing sandwiches, and you can actually take so much more down the paddock. So one of the first things that I've got is like Ned's lunch bags insulated, so I can send things that need to be cold. But in winter, I've also got a hot pot. So I preheat it, and then I can send anything hot down the paddock. So whether that's soup or mac and cheese or spaghetti bolognese, something.
Jace has a great little 12-volt oven that like plugs into the cigarette lighter. And so the number of things he'll take that he can then put in the oven, so he can toast sandwiches or take casserole or pasta and heat it up himself later on. That's been really handy too. So it saves the driving down the paddock, which is great with little people.
Yes.
I think that was a huge adjustment. Soph was born in October 21. And so harvest was slightly delayed. We didn't start to sort of mid to late November, which is quite late for us. But suddenly juggling this new little person, and I was used to doing runs of food, particularly for dinner. You know, and during summer you're not running it till 7:30, 8:30, that kind of thing. But with a little person, like they're wanting to sleep or feed, and we had, I think, 2 or 3 nights that I tried delivering, and it was just like blood-curdling screaming the whole time, and I get quite overstimulated with constant screaming, so I didn't cope too well, so I was like pulling up and like, here's your dinner, and passing it out the window, bawling and so screaming. Jason's like, oh God, go home. Like, literally don't worry. And the next day, I think I made the biggest vat ever of this beef casserole that was probably horrendous, and like froze it in individual foil containers that could go in this little oven. I'm like, right, if you want something, you get one of those. Otherwise, you can have. I'll see if I can pack something, but it's just there's something I can't do. So yeah, we got through that year, but I think that was an important one, because I can be a bit of a overachiever sometimes and think I've got to do everything, and having that reality check that you actually don't have to do all of it all the time. And if you want something, he's a big boy, he can work it out, or he's just going to have to come home. Like, there's got to be a compromise there. I think that was a really important lesson for me. And that was sort of one of the things, in reflecting on sort of doing this chat, sort of working out for everyone what are the things that are non-negotiables and what are the things that you can sort of compromise or let slip for a little bit. And in work, we often talk about, you know, you've got lots of balls in the air, but you've got to work out which one's a rubber and which one's a glass. The glass ones you've got to catch, and the rubber ones, they'll just keep bouncing until you can actually pick them up. And so if it's adapting what food you're on down the paddock, or for me, cleaning. Like, I used to be so highly strong on cleaning. I'm like, seriously, as long as there's not dead bugs that Soph's going to be eating and make her sick, like, we can just let it go for a day, because she's got a thing with picking up beetles at the moment and like trying to munch their heads off. But, you know, that's something that I can let slip, or, you know, you can try to outsource as well, get a cleaner or whatever it might be. So, working out that you don't have to do all of it all the time. Very comfortable.
Very comfortable.
Very comfortable. Why wouldn't you be?
Hey?
Oh gosh.
Just wanted mum.
That's it. I guess like going back to your question on the best pieces of advice you were given as well. Another one was probably which I think is so tricky when you then have kids is like join your husband where they are if you can. So yeah, like when I used to visit Jace on the farm when he was still living with his parents, I'd always go out and be on the tractor with him on the weekends, because the reason I was there was to see him, not to sit in the house. I was always out and about. And then we moved to our own place, did that a little bit less because I had other stuff to do, but would still try to get out and do things. And then I think having kids, and particularly in solely cropping, it's always in huge noisy machines or around chemical, or it's sort of, and going around the clock, and it's a little bit trickier to just be out there. But I think that's been something that I think was a great piece of advice, just trying to get out and spend that time together, because I see, you see so often friends in the city, they'll be having lovely lunches with their partner on the weekend, or going to the beach, and often in farming you just don't get that time out and time away.
We just don't stop.
Yeah, that's it. And instead of being bitter and twisted about it, sometimes you've got to flip it and go, well, how can we spend time together while they're doing their thing? And my friend was saying she packs a picnic and just goes down the paddock, and her husband stops work for a little bit, they sit down and have a picnic together overlooking the farm, and then he can get back to it, she goes home. Like just little things like that where it's about the quality of time, not necessarily the quantity. And I think that was a big one.
And sometimes it's that mindset of, how do I romanticise this?
Yeah. Exactly. I think romance takes on a whole new meaning, doesn't it, when you marry a farmer, and then when you have kids, it's sometimes it's just, I think even little things for us, like eating dinner around the dining table, which I think sometimes we're terrible for getting into a bit of a slump of, it's just easier to just sit in front of the TV and you just want to switch off. But you're not communicating when you do that. Yeah. So, and the way our house is set up as well, we're in this tiny house, the dining room's off separate, so you sort of, it turns into a bit of a dumping ground for everything. So trying to, I think that's something we do have to get back into the habit of, because we get a bit naughty with just, sitting in front of the TV or something like that. But things like that, you've sort of got to actively and consciously work on it, and
I think that's definitely one thing that has helped as our boys have gotten older is we sit at the table to eat dinner now, and that's just, we've always really worked on our communication and being a team, and having the older boys really helps with that.
Absolutely. And I think you can see, because Soph's not quite 18 months, she's still eating quite early, and and quite often she's in bed before Jace is even home, so we're still in that awkward phase where it's sort of not quite working. But I can see that not too far into the future it will be a bit more doable to actually eat together and use that more as an active conversation time. But I think we need to do it as a couple anyway. Particularly with the kids as well. I think it's a good habit to be in as well, because even as kids we always sat at the table and you pick up so many things, like conversation skills as well. So I've really noticed that, sitting around the table you have a lot of, time to chat about lots of different things, and it's not just what did you see on TV or talking about other people. It's what do you think about this world issue, or this topic. Like you can talk about lots of different things, and I sort of noticed that chatting to various people. There's lots of different conversation strategies and things that I think sitting around the dinner table probably has a lot to do with it, because you're actually actively engaging and communicating. But there's lots of those little tips and tricks, aren't there? Particularly, I think food is a big one. It's, that we're always, and as I said, that's where Tracker Snacks came from, was just sharing lots of different tips and tricks and ideas, and quite often someone will tell you something, that is amazing, like how have I never thought of that? So it's pretty cool. I like it. Obviously because I made Tracker Snacks, so that's a given. Oh dear. I think navigating the whole kids food thing is our next hurdle. Like Soph was a really good eater, and then she goes through phases of and she's in a mad Wheat Bix phase at the moment. So she'll eat Wheat Bix and peanut butter or Vegemite sandwiches and fruit. And that's about the extent of her palate at the moment, which is so annoying because she was like into risotto and pasta and steak and like she'd smash anything. So even like that's probably our next hurdle.
We had to learn to negotiate food allergies. So my boys are gluten and dairy free.
Oh gosh.
And and then having to work out when we go to other places which are nut free. So then thinking, okay, I can't send their almond milk or their anything to do that I use as substitutes.
Yeah.
And then we've also got in our family one of the girls are gluten, dairy, and egg free.
Yeah.
So learning that was really interesting, and I'm actually really surprised once we had to go down that track, the options.
Yeah.
I was like, there's so many options that you can either make yourself, or now I think as consumers we're becoming more aware of that as well. So there are options if you don't have time to bake or you don't have time.
That's it. It's amazing. Oh yeah, I've got a friend who's gluten intolerant, and then through various like kids having allergies and then growing out of them, they've gone through from just gluten through to the extent of no gluten, dairy, egg or soy.
Yeah.
And hosting birthday parties is like, it's so interesting. I've not enjoyed the whole food allergies thing, but I find it quite interesting, and particularly from a food perspective, because I like hosting and making sure people are having a nice time and everyone's well fed, making sure that the food's safe. Because I know how many times she's been caught with like cross-contamination of things, even with just gluten, let alone, you know, for kids who are now, like one of them's anaphylactic to egg. So it's significant. Yeah. I find it quite interesting. It's like, okay, so we can do all these things, we'll keep them all separate and then have a list, and she's aware of what she can have and what kids can have. And and she's like, you don't have to go to this level. I'm like, no, but I find it quite interesting. So, and I like to make sure that people can eat when you come to my house. So
for quite a while I was that odd mum that would turn up to a kid's birthday party with their own packed lunch, because it was so hard. I don't want to expect that someone else will cater for my kids, but also it's really hard at this age to explain to them why they can't eat the party food. More than it will make you sick. And but all the other kids are eating cake or eating...
And understanding what does and doesn't have the allergens in it. Like my niece is allergic to cow's milk, and she's 4.5 now, so it's a lot easier to explain to her that things like chocolate, yogurt, they've all got cow's milk in them. And then making sure there's an alternative that's separate for her. But she's now really good that if someone who doesn't know her offers her chocolate, she'll go, oh no, I can't have that. Or I need to check with mum. Mum, am I allowed to have this? Oh yeah, that's only Skittles, they're not M&Ms, so you're fine with that. But it's so much easier now that she's at the stage that she understands, whereas previously it was just constant monitoring and everyone having to make sure, because she had a couple of reactions where it was even, someone had buttered a piece of bread, wiped it off, and then scooped a piece of avocado that she'd eaten, and that gave her a reaction. So it was just that the traces were enough. It's scary, isn't it, if there's allergies sometimes.
Particularly when you may not be in town. So when we were doing all the allergy introductions, particularly for our first two, we made sure, we're not far from town, but we made sure we were in town, particularly with like nuts and seafood and all that sort of stuff.
Anything that's going to be the really nice
today's going to be a town day and we're going to try this.
Oh gosh. Whole new level of things. And that's for all parents, I guess, isn't it? Having to try and navigate that, but then just throwing in the sort of extra challenges of distance or whether you've got support close by, and it's just adds a new level of complexity, I think. So I think in terms of the important lessons on farm, like things like just enjoying the peace and quiet, I think sometimes we can feel quite isolated and you start to ruminate on the negatives almost, and I'm so far from town and I'm so far from people and I can't do this and I can't do that. But if we just flip that situation to, but I've actually got all this space and it's quiet, and at home we sleep with all the doors and windows open, getting a beautiful breeze, and you can't, for security, you can't do that in town. So just sort of flipping it, I guess, and enjoying where you live. Like there's a reason we live where we live and marry who we marry, and not getting too caught up or negative about it. I think that's a big one. And even just sort of relishing the highs and enjoying the good days and remembering that, particularly through all we've been through over the last, say, 5 years. Like, there's been droughts and floods and fires and mice and pandemic, and it's just been a hot mess. But we're getting through it, and there's been a lot of good things as well. Like we've welcomed a little person, and we've learned a lot more about ourselves. We've had good seasons, and we've got a great community. Like if you sort of start to think about all those things, life isn't all that bad. We're ticking along pretty well. So
we can go outside and see the stars, and you can't do that in town.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Even when we go on holidays, we suddenly realise we're like cranky old people sometimes. The street noise is there's too much noise. Or one time we were staying in this beautiful place right on the beach, like, oh no, too much light coming in off the street noise, or the waves at the beach were too noisy. It's like, oh my gosh, can't believe I'm whinging about the beach.
But we'd never hear the cicadas, or we'd never hear the crickets.
Exactly. There's a dam like right next to our house, and just the last couple of days since the rain, like the frogs and everything, it's quite the symphony. But you don't even notice it. Whereas if there was trucks going past, you'd be going off about it. So it's it's a tricky one. It's just sort of what you're used to, I guess. I think the only other lesson or tip I had was getting involved in community, particularly like around Colite. We've got such a great little community, and the sign on the drive-in says it's a population of 39, which is, I think, they've well and truly overinflated that number. But it's an awesome little spot. So we've got 2 CWAs, we've got a tennis club, the pub that everyone knows, with TikTok Tom. He's really put the place on the map. But it's a great little community spot, and I think particularly during the drought, everyone really rallied together, and there were, donations and fodder drops and events and things that just came together because we knew one another and we wanted to do that for the community. And I think that's a real country thing. Like, even during COVID, there were so many, through my work, we got donated a heap of toilet paper from the Salvation Army when you couldn't buy toilet paper, and got to go and do a letterbox drop to everyone. It was like the height of lockdown. We weren't allowed anyone, like, this is essential, like, this is an essential service. And just how thankful people were. I'm like, that kind of thing just wouldn't happen in the city where you're just popping into your neighbours' places delivering stuff, and you'd hope that would happen. But I think rural living is just really different. So making the most of it and being inclusive is really important. All the committees and clubs we have across various ages and stages and genders, and it's really nice, the people you meet and then what you learn from them as well. And CWA is a big one with that. Like, we've got some of the older members who we just learn so much from, and their journeys through marriage and kids and that whole process. And us with our new babies, like, oh my gosh, this is terrible, like, no one's ever had this before, and get over it, I had 4 and we did this. And, you just sort of, you get a bit of a reality check, but learn a lot from them as well. So it's I think community is really important. But I think they're probably the main almost tips, or like things that I really try to remind myself as well. Sometimes it's not just tips to tell other people, it's things to really reflect on yourself and remind yourself. And the fact that every farm and family business is so different. So like, you look over the fence at what someone else is doing and you go, oh, they've got it so good and we've got all these problems, but it's really, they've got their own stuff going on. And you just got to pick out what things you like and try and adapt it for the best for your own sort of situation. So
was there anything in particular that you changed or adapted once your daughter joined you on farm? Like we talked about the driving and the meals and
I think those things have been huge. And I think for us, like, COVID's impacted it as well. So back when we moved in together, we were quite good at sharing roles, around cooking and not necessarily cleaning, but probably more so the cooking and garden and stuff like that. And then we took on in the family business, they took on a lease block next door. So they've got 50% more country, so everything's busier, so I see less of Jace. Then we had COVID, so I was always home, working from home, so I just naturally started doing everything. And now we've got a bub, so I was on maternity leave, so I was at home, so I was naturally doing everything. And now, transitioning back to work, I've reflected, we've gone through like 3 or 4 years where I've been doing absolutely everything.
Yeah.
And now we're in this sort of struggle phase, to be honest, trying to work out, well, how do we divide those roles back up again when Jace is just like the busiest he's ever been. Yeah. I'm busy with it's just and I don't have a solution for it. And I think that's something that talking to other mums and learning and that whole concept of outsourcing where you can, or understanding what balls are glass and which ones are rubber and what I can let slide has been such an important lesson for me. And so it's not necessarily something that's come from others, it's just been through that process. So I think that's been a big juggle since having Soph. And then really just remembering to slow down sometimes and let the chaos be and just enjoy spending time with her. They grow up so fast, and I sound like a grandma when I say that. But she's nearly 18 months old. Like, where's my tiny little baby like this gone? And it's amazing. So I think
learning to be the calm within the chaos.
It's a really great way of putting it, I think. And just what you prioritise as well. Like, some days I need to remind myself that we need to just have some messy play or go and play in the dirt or in some water or do something rather than follow the mountain of washing or think about dinner. It's like, worst case, highly strung past me, put stuff in the freezer so we'll just defrost something, it's spaghetti bolognese again, guys. Those sorts of things rather than trying to think of something and really making the most of the fun days, because even you'll think, we'll do it on the weekend, and that's when they're sick or they're teething or things just go to shit.
Yeah.
So making the most of when things are good, I think.
Yeah. I think one of the best things we did with the washing was I got a basket for each room. Yeah. So when I take the washing off the line, I take several baskets out, and the towels go in one, stuff for our room goes in one for the kids goes in theirs. Yeah. And then it doesn't matter if it doesn't get unpacked. The washing basket with the right clothes in it is in the right room.
That's it. That's the main thing. Even just having a dirty clothes basket in each room has been so good. So everything just immediately goes in. You're not traipsing around the house with various bits and pieces. But that's a good one. Our house is sort of a bit small, I think, for that one. But you do end up sometimes with just baskets of stuff everywhere. Yeah. But it's all a learning curve. It's just constantly learning. You can either freak out and think, I don't know what I'm doing and I don't have this, or you can just go, no, we're learning and we're evolving, and I know more than I did yesterday, and I'll probably know more tomorrow, and that's the way it's supposed to be. Yeah. So I think, as I said at the start, I think it probably wasn't as hard for me, the transition onto the farm, because I came from that background. So you almost have a lot of background knowledge, and even though it was from a different operation, a different farm, sometimes you don't actually realise how much you do know and what your values are and those sorts of things. So if you're brand new moving to the farm, I think seeking out the people around you who can be kind of your new village. And on the flip side, if you're from the land, being willing to impart some of that knowledge to other people. So, in my community, there's a couple of girls who've moved up from the city, and some of the things that just blow their minds, I don't even realise I take for granted. Like, blackouts, those sorts of things, and being able to just roll with the punches and knowing that you don't open the fridge, you don't open the freezer, you go get the generator, like all those sorts of things are just second nature to us. But being willing to support other people in that, or on the flip side, seeking out information and some guidance. I think that's really important.
And making sure you've got that box or that shelf that has the batteries and the torches or the candles, depending on your house setup.
Where you know where they are. And even think, in modern days, sometimes it's, do you have something that can charge your devices. So we've got power banks and things like that, or my jump starter kit in the car, you can plug a phone into that as well and charge it up. So just little things like that, because it wasn't until the blackout we had only a few days ago, we suddenly realised how reliant we've become on Starlink internet and our phone booster. We've got pretty much full service and full high-speed internet all the time. And I'd kind of forgotten how crap our service is. That when everything dropped out, it's like, oh, I'm only down to 1 bar of 3G. What is this?
Or down to SOS.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's right. I've got to go out the front and stand on one leg and stick my tongue out the right way, and you can get the second bar. Yeah. But those sorts of things that you just sort of don't realise. But I think just making it easy for yourself, having that box and things like that is so crucial. And probably finally that there's never going to be a perfect good time. Like if we keep sitting and waiting for the good years and the good times, they're never going to come. You've got to make them now. And
they're really 1 in 10 for season-wise.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like even if we have a wet year, it ends up being too wet. Or like last year, I was like, it was a bumpy year. We ended up with disease through all, a lot of our crops. The year before that, bumpy year, it was hail damage. It's just, there's always something. So instead of dwelling on that, just going, and working out what we can and can't control, focusing on what you can control, focus on the good stuff and make the most of what you can and what you've got. And these little ones are pretty special. Okay. So,
was there any other particular tips that you've given to those girls who've moved out that we take for granted, just in general conversation? Because I think that would be helpful as well.
Yeah, I'm racking my brain. I think we go there seem to be tips nearly every week, and the group chats and things like, didn't you know? Yeah. Even things like the box in your car of what to take. Navigating blackouts. Navigating wet days and understanding sometimes you cannot get out your driveway, and that's just the way rural life goes. So I think some of it's more so not necessarily tips, but also helping people with that frustration and the mentality that, particularly in the city, if it's raining, you can still go out and get your coffee and go to meetings and go to catch-ups, whereas on the farm, and for us, we might get stuck for a week or two at a time. So having, veggies in the freezer, a bottle of that long life milk in the cupboard, so that you can definitely limp through for an extra week or two if needed. All those sorts of things I think are, things that we take for granted that you just do. And they're sorts of things that you can pass on to other people.
We always have the packet we're using and then the backup packet. So we're never ordering or we're never buying when we're out. We're replacing.
You're replacing the backup, I'm the same, and it's led to my pantry looking ridiculous. There's so much stuff in there. The other day I was like, I think I really need to do a pantry dive and just try and live off the pantry. Or I think last year I did a challenge out of my fridge that I termed on Track Snacks half a jar challenge. That there's half a jar of all this random stuff. So let's every night just grab a jar and find work out what you can do. So curry paste, made jam drops, different relishes, or we're kind of condiment fiends in our house. We've got about 5 different types of barbecue sauce in the fridge and all sorts of things. But trying to sort of use all those bits and pieces up. And that's such a good tip. Always having the backup. So, and I think if you confidently can go through for longer, it just takes that stress off. Because even I found myself last week, because I'm back at work now, I actually forgot to do the groceries on Wednesday afternoon when I finished work. I forgot to do it. And it wasn't until I got home and I went to make dinner. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got no milk, no bread, no butter, no fresh fruit and veg because today was grocery day. Shit. But I was like, I've got long life milk, I've got this, I've got that, and it was just, okay, no worries.
Got that packet of pasta.
Go tomorrow. If that doesn't work, we'll go the next day. It's not the end of the world. Whereas it's a gradual process, but I think this is such a good opportunity to share those ideas, and even, I guess, for those of us who may have been on the land for a long time or whatever age or stage you're at, giving us the opportunity to reflect on what are some of those things you've learned or things you've heard, and I think you suddenly realise how far you have come or how much you have learned. So even this process is a nice reflective process. You can tell I'm a social worker. I'm a very reflective sort of person, but yeah, no, it's good fun. I think that's all of my tips and tricks. Oh, last one is get off farm.
Yeah.
Just get out, and even if it's running to town to pick up chemical, like put on your nice slippy or put on some bright earrings, and you'll feel so much better.
Yeah.
And make the most of that. So
we have the rule. Well, it's not really a rule, but we always joke that you never know who you're going to run into in town.
Yeah.
So you've always got to dress up, and you've always got to wear the proper shoes, because you never know when you think you're just running in to drop a car to service, and you've put on your Crocs, and then no one can pick you up from town because something's happened on farm, and so then you're stuck in town in Crocs.
And it's invariably the town, like the one time you do wear Crocs, that the shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
If you had worn boots, they would have picked you up immediately.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's exactly right. And it's funny, we're exactly the same. Like I think at boarding school, we really let ourselves slip, and it was cool to wear like trackies and Ugg boots on the bus home and like walk down the street and that. And then, oh my gosh, I made myself
we did that.
I disgust myself with that. And nowadays I feel a bit grubby just going to town in thongs. Like now I'm like, oh my god, put sandals on. Or I'm like such a snob. But it's so important because it makes you feel good. Yeah, that's what I mean. Put a bit of lippy on, or whatever is the thing that makes you feel good. Do your hair, or put your good cap on, whatever it might be. But yeah, getting off farm, I think, sometimes, particularly with little ones, sometimes you don't realise how long you've just been in the same routine and of being at home.
And learning to talk to other people that aren't in riddle short term. It's like short terms that you use at home, or talking to kids. How do I have a conversation again?
That's it. And then the next step to that is how to have a conversation that's not just about kids as well. I think the transition back to work is a really good one for that it's not all about food and poo and spew and sleep. There are other things in the world, like amazingly, there are other things that we can talk about. And
some of those topics that we're used to talking about aren't actually appropriate for general society.
Or maybe not that interesting to other people, surprisingly. So, it's a good one. It's, broaden your horizons a bit.
Thank you for coming to the farm, Camilla, and having a chat to us, sharing your tips, tricks and your story. Thank you everybody for joining along with us. If you haven't seen some of our previous episodes, I'll add some of the links in the description below, and we will see you next time.